Hello everybody from Element and Element Plus. I think you all know me at least a little bit. I'm Jim, one of the curates. Michael's asked me to speak for about 10 minutes on whether science disproves God. And I think the reason he's asked me to do it is that I have a background in science. Until less than a year ago, I was a hospital doctor. And as you know, doctors have to learn quite a bit of science. And I was also a university professor. And that was a scientific job as well. Having said that, I have never seriously doubted God because of science or science because of God. For me, they fit together very naturally. And so it may be that as I answer for you, I don't actually cover the particular concerns that you have. And for that reason, there'll be time after this 10-minute video for you to ask questions to whoever is doing your Element or Element Plus evening. What I'm planning to do is go through a few of the reasons why people might ask that question, and then finish with saying why for me the two fit together quite naturally, and maybe a bit about how they fit together. So, reasons why people think God and science don't fit together. Here's reason one. It seems as though lots of other people think it, and so it's easy to pick up their assumptions. You might have teachers or school friends or parents who think that you either have to believe in science or you have to believe in God. Well, I just want to point out that doesn't naturally follow. Lots of people who know science well don't take that view, and one or two of them are incredibly famous scientists. To give you three really well-known examples, Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin and James Maxwell, three of the most important scientists, simply don't take that view. They were Christians and thoughtful Christians and connected their science and their Christian faith very, very happily. In fact, you can say a little more than that. Most of the scientific disciplines came out of the study of Christianity. In the early days in the history of science, lots of people thought that the universe would be random, but those who had a Christian faith expected to find an orderly universe, and so they were the ones that tended to study that universe and became the physicists and the biologists. Second reason why people might ask the question: there seem to be Bible stories that break the rules of science, like the miracles. Doesn't that mean we have to believe one or the other? Well, I just want you to think about that question for a minute. Of course, if there is no God, we don't expect anybody to break the known rules of science. But if there is a God, does it not make sense that the one who orders the rules of the scientific world is also in authority over them and can break them very happily? In fact, would we not expect him to break them if he stepped into time as God? The way that the miracles are told in the Bible stories, they are often Jesus proving that he has authority over the rules of nature in order to prove that he is God. And so that's exactly what we might expect him to do. It'd be rather surprising if he stepped in to prove his identity and didn't have power over the laws of nature that he had set, wouldn't it? Third reason, there are some scientific discoveries that some people think clash with the revelation of the Bible, the story of the Bible. A couple of examples. Dinosaur fossils, they're not spoken about in Genesis, so does that mean that the two can't fit together? Or the Big Bang theory, does that mean that it wasn't in fact God, but something completely random that created the universe? I think I want to say here, it's important to understand the language that the Bible speaks. Like all literature, the Bible speaks in a number of different what are called genres. For example, the New Testament letters are written exactly as you'd expect letters to be written. They're either answering a question or providing a bit of advice or comfort. They're communication documents. The books of history in the Bible are written to tell the history of, for example, the people of Israel. There's wonderful poetry in the Bible, like the Psalms, and we don't read all of those things in the same way, and we shouldn't. The story of creation is not written, I think, as a history. If you look at the way it's set out, it's rhythmic and repetitive and beautifully written, which would suggest that it's more in the genre of poetry. So what do we expect poetry to tell us about? Often we expect poetry to tell us about the truth that's beyond the facts. Let me give a tiny example. If I write a love poem, I probably don't write, "Each time I see you, I get a cold sweat and my heart rate goes up." I want to tell the poem in order to tell the truth that is beyond the facts. And I think that that's the best way to read Genesis. What do we learn if we read Genesis that way? Some absolutely massive truths that are beyond the facts and details, like it was God who did the creating. He made everything from nothing. He loves order and brought order out of chaos. Man in all of creation has a particular privileged and valued position because of God. These are all massive things, and they're things that Genesis tells us. I don't think Genesis tells us the ingredients or the order or the timings with which God did creation. So when you take something then like dinosaurs or Neanderthal and you think, well, because there's no place within the 7 days for them to fit, it means that you can't have both dinosaurs and Genesis. I think that is reading Genesis entirely the wrong way. Please feel free to ask more about that. I know it's a massive sticking point for some people. And by the way, I'm not suggesting we don't take Genesis seriously. I'm suggesting we read Genesis for the purpose that it's written for. A fourth reason why people might ask the question, they kind of think, well, if science has explained everything, there is no need for a God anymore. I think that's wrong on two levels. First of all, even if we did know everything about how things worked, that doesn't answer the question of why they work in the way that they do and why there is something instead of nothing. So even an utterly complete understanding of the universe in no way suggests that God need not be behind the order that we've just studied to find out about the universe. In no way does it explain why there's something instead of nothing. There is a second thing, though. This is a bit more scientific. You know, there are quite significant gaps in our understanding. For example, the Big Bang Theory remains a theory. And although we can see evolution in action, and it's definitely real and causes species to change over time, there are no evolutionists who think that we have all the evidence to show that it's responsible for the very beginnings of life from chemicals. There are a few evolutionists who think that it could, like Richard Dawkins, for example, very famous example, but he's actually in the minority. The majority of evolutionists acknowledge that whilst we can see species getting more interesting over time through evolution, we don't have all the bits of the jigsaw to take us back to the beginning, and there are quite big gaps. Oh, there is one other. There are Christians who just sound a bit silly when they talk about science. They suggest, for example, that dinosaur bones were planted as a decoy, or they read Genesis as if it was a recipe book for the way in which creation took place. Yes, there were 7 24-hour periods and so on. I would just say that what's happening there is they're revealing their convictions. Because they're confident that God was involved, they're interpreting everything according to that. And in doing so, they are really doing the same as some scientists do. Because they're confident that science has the answer, they're discounting a whole load of things that the Bible has to say. I'm not sure that you need to take either of those positions. I don't think either of them is sensible. For me, the two fit together perfectly naturally. And so a word on how they fit together. I don't believe that you have to have a science brain and a Christian brain, and you turn off your Christian brain to study science, and you turn off your science brain to study the Bible or be a Christian. Another way of saying that is I don't believe that Christianity deals in soft truths and science in hard truths. Like the Bible, I think that the hard truths of our creation actually point us to a God who is orderly and magnificent in all that he does. And I think understanding that we have a God who's orderly and magnificent points us to wonder even more at science. So I don't think it's one or the other, or two different brains, or that you have to control your view of one through your perspective of the other. Far from any of those. I think the two very naturally fit together, complementing one another. That's my view, but very happy to take questions.